So yesterday I got it to where we can add items to our inventory, but it's not integrated with any of our other systems right now. So today I want to work on that. And I also want to change the order of the rendering here. Let's do that real quick before we get started. So, inventory grid. Let's take a look at this again. Okay. So inventory grid on paint is drawing our lines on the Okay, we'll just leave it for now. It might get addressed in the videos that we've been going through anyway. So create an event.
Score icon, knife. All these out real quick and see if it works. So if we press I and we walk over the grenade, it picks.
You're not worrying about the pickup stuff.
I'm a software engineer at Amazon, and I learned how to code on Udemy.
We want to get
All
the
right, welcome to part 4 of the
drag and drop
spatial
stuff
inventory
implementation.
tutorial. So in the last 3, I guess, we got it working so you can walk over items and it will pick them up and it will add them to the correct spot in your inventory. But the thing we need to do next is make it so we can actually drag these items around. And as you can see right now, when I drag, it is kind of like moving the camera around, which isn't ideal. So it's actually pretty easy to fix that. So basically what we need to do, if we open up the inventory widget and we go to the designer tab and we go to the border and we come down here and we bind something to this on mouse button down. So let's just hit this and say create binding. What we want to do here is
I'm learning a lot about the UI stuff by doing this too. Wait. Events. And if I know anything about drag and drop, that means we're going to need bindings for this. Bindings for this. And what the hell, let's go ahead and just do a binding for the last one. Okay. Oops. Come on. Make event apply. Alright, so now it should take input from the player away. Or not. Okay, maybe not.
So let's just hit this and say create binding. What we want to do here is simply just handle this event and let the system know that we already handled this event so that it doesn't have to do anything with this. So if we just return handled, you can see if we
That's cool. Okay, nice. Sort of. I don't understand why it's working sometimes. Okay, I do understand. It's because we don't have the handler for the grid. Okay, I get it. We're gonna need something similar at the grid level. Alright, let's continue.
run this now and we do the same thing and I drag the mouse around and I click, it no longer moves it. And that's because we're basically telling the system that, don't worry about this mouse down event, don't process it. We handled it ourselves, even though we're not doing anything with it. But you'll notice if we do it over top of the grid, it still
Yeah.
is happening. That's because we need to do the same thing for the grid. So if we go to the grid,
Okay, so for the we don't need a double click handler here. And I'm gonna guess he's gonna do like a drag start, drag end, dragging type scenario, is my suspicion. already kind of know where this is going. There's going to be like a get cell index from mouse click or something like that. Okay, now we have full control on the inventory screen. Can't see my cursor because of the OBS bug, but just trust me. Kill our little dummy friend. Okay. Mm,
Go to the designer tab, and we click on the border. Scroll down, and override on mouse.
shit, did I add it to the right? Fuck. Okay, I did.
Mouse button down, and again, just return handled, like so. And just to test it real quick, you can see now wherever we
Yep.
click, it's not rotating our screen, but we can still walk around just fine, which is what we want. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is, well, the drag and dropping. So basically, when we hover over an item, we want it to kind of have a white background to it or some sort of highlighted background to show that we are hovering over it. And then we also want to be able to drag it and drop it, right? So maybe let's do the hovering first. So let's go to the item widget, and then let me open it up on my other screen just so I can have something to copy. Okay, so in the event graph, we are going to override, so down here below refresh, we are going to override the on mouse button down. No, wait, that's not the right one. Hold on. Control Z, undo that.
Mouse over.
What is it called? On mouse enter, I think. Yes, on mouse enter. There we go. That's the one I wanted. So on mouse enter. And we also want to override
Okay.
what is it called? On mouse leave. Okay, so these events get called obviously when the mouse enters this section or when it leaves this section of the UI. So when it enters this section, we can safely assume that the mouse is hovering over the item. So all we wanted to do is drag in the background border. And we will say set brush color. And the color we want to set it to is really up to you, but you basically just want to make it some sort of like highlighted color. So in this case, I'm going to use 0 0.5, 0 0.5, 0 0.5, and like 0 0.2. So some like kind of whitish looking color. And then when it leaves, you want to set it back to whatever you currently have it set to. So if you go to your designer tab and you click on the border,
So sharp. Interesting. I must admit, I'm a little confused that there was no color change there, but there is here. I guess it was perfectly balancing out to match the background color. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. But it should still be obvious. Can we add a border? Oh, let's keep going.
You can see the brush color is currently set to 0, 0, 0, and 0.5. So that's what we want to set it back to. So we'll just copy this and we will say 0, 0, 0, and 0.5. I think that's what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. We pick up some stuff and we hover over the stuffs. You can see it now kind of shows us a little highlighted version of the icon to show us where we are hovering over. So that's pretty easy. The next thing we need to do is the drag and dropping. So in order for this to work, we need to override a very specific event, and it is called, let's see if we can find it, on drag detected. So on drag detected.
Hang on a second. Oops. Uh,
Basically get called whenever the system detects that you started dragging something. So whenever you start holding down the mouse and then moving it. So this is a drag, obviously, right? So whenever it detects that the drag has started, it's going to call this event. So what we need to do inside of here is we need to then go ahead and create a drag and drop operation. So if you right click and you search for create drag and drop operation, it will show up. And so let's go ahead and create this. So the important things here are the payload and the default drag visual. So the payload is essentially, if you hover over it, it probably explains it better than I can. It says the payload of the drag operation. This can be any U object that you want to pass along as dragged data. So, and it even says if you were building an inventory screen, this would be the U object representing the item being moved to another slot. So it pretty much tells us exactly what it needs to be. It needs to be the object that represents the thing we're dragging. Which of course is our item object. So we will hook that up. And then the default drag visual is the widget it will display while it's being dragged. And we basically can just pass in ourself because we don't really want it to change. If you wanted the image to look different when you were dragging it for some reason, you could create your own type of widget here and pass it in, but we're just going to pass in ourselves because we don't want it to really change. And then once we have it created, we then want to remove the item object from the inventory because as soon as we start dragging it, we're going to count it as removed from the inventory. So we can say item object, and we want to call on removed. So we'll call our on removed event.
Okay.
Like so. And then we also want to remove it from parent. So remove from parent, which will remove it from the screen itself. And then we want to return the operation. So drag this guy over here, and then I'm just going to add some reroute nodes.
Wait, what? Okay,
So
guess
it
it's not
doesn't
there yet.
cut through everything. Okay. I think that's, let me see here for a second. I think that might be all we need to do to see it. Oh, wait, actually, one thing. So, in order for this to get called, you need to also do something else. So, if you override the on mouse button down, you have to drag off this mouse event and say detect drag if pressed. If you don't do this, then the on drag detected will never get called. So you kind of have to tell it to like keep an eye out for a drag to happen, which is essentially what this is doing. And then you need to select the key that you want to use for dragging. So you want to use the left mouse button. If you had a controller or something, you'd use like, whatever you want here. But so the left mouse button is the key we want to detect the drag for. And so this makes sure it gets called, and then that will eventually call this once the drag happens. And so if we go ahead and we play this now, we should be able to at least start dragging something, I think. Yes.
Cool. All right, neat.
So there we go. So I can now drag this around, but if I drop it, it's just like disappears into, well, who really knows where it goes, but it's just gone forever. Oh, it came back. Oh, it's guess because I'm picking it up again or something. I don't know, but it's in a weird state right now. But we can at least start dragging things. So the next thing we need to do is handle the drops. So what I mean by that is when we are dragging something and then we drop it somewhere, well, it needs to figure out what it can do. And if you think about it here, so if we run this again, so when we're dragging an item, we can either drop it like out here, and if we drop it out here outside of our inventory, then we want to drop it on the ground in front of the player. But if we drop it in our inventory, then we want to try to add it to the location where we dropped it at. And then if it doesn't fit there, then we want to try to add it just anywhere to the inventory. And if it can't fit anywhere in the inventory, then we want to just default to dropping it on the ground. So that's kind of like the logic behind how this is going to work. So let's start with the inventory. I don't know. Let's start with dropping things on the ground first, because I think we need that in order to do the other one. So for dropping things on the ground, we basically want to detect if the mouse is over top of this area whenever we drop it. So to do that, if we go to the inventory widget, we can override the on drop event. So over here on the left, you can say override, and on, where is it? On drop. So this will get called whenever a drag and drop operation is dropped over top of this widget. So inside of here, what we want to do is we just want to drop the item on the ground. So this is the operation. So we can say get payload. And if you remember, the payload is the actual item object. And so we can then cast this to our BP underscore item object. And we want to make it a pure cast, so we don't need the pin. Pins. And then after that, we want to spawn this item. So the way I did this in my tutorial is because you can't actually, well, you can spawn items here, but since we're going to be dropping things in multiple places, like we drop things here, but we also drop things if it doesn't fit in our inventory. We want to have like a nice way of dropping things that can be called from anywhere. So what we're actually going to do is inside of our game state, we're going to add the functionality so that anybody can call it from anywhere. Just going to make things a little bit easier for you. So if you already have a game state, feel free to add this code to your existing game state. It's just going to be a little bit of code. It's not going to be anything major. But if you don't already have a game state, then what you want to do is you want to right click. I guess we can just do it here. Right click and say blueprint class, and we want to create a new game state. Now, when you're creating a game state, you can either choose base or like the one without base at the end of it. And if you hover over it, it says that the game state is for multiplayer. It has like special stuff built in if you're doing a multiplayer game. And game state base is just like a generic game state. So depending on if you're doing multiplayer or not, you might want to select the appropriate one. But I'm not doing multiplayer, so I'm just going to select game state base. And then we will just call this my game state. And so inside of here, we're just going to create like a handy little function that handles dropping things. So I'm going to make a new function, and it's going to be called spawn item from actor. And the reason it's called spawn item from actor is because it's going to take in an actor, and it's going to spawn the item in front of that actor. So like I just said, we want it to take in an actor, so we will add.
Why not just do it in the component that you already got a reference to, you know? And then we can just come back over here and say don't worry about this later because we have to integrate this with our existing systems. So like I'm kind of ignoring all of his like this is how we put it in the level logic because we already have some of that and it just kind of doesn't make sense for us to duplicate that logic when we know we're going to have to override it. So and then what we'll do is just go in here then we're going to need a handled event in our inventory grid as well. Handle inventory something like that. So now, if I were to pick up like the pistol and drag it and drop it here, we can handle inventory reinsert, and if I was to grab this and drop it over here, we get dropped item. Okay, perfect. Beautiful.
Add a actor, and we will set the type to actor, object reference. And we will also add the item that we're trying to drop. So we'll say item object.
Seeing like all of
And
this
this will
stuff
be
is
the
just
item
directly available on
object.
the component, so I
Actually,
don't
let
know
me
why
put
we
this
wouldn't
one
just
on
use
top.
that.
I'm going to rearrange these. And this one should be called actor. I thought I already named it, but here at front, we'll set that. And we clamp a location. So we want to update it on action separately. So we'll just pass in our location. Apparently, it doesn't remember the item object class
Come
and
back
make
to all
changes in a
that.
second. So the class, drag it into the public category, make it pure const, and we want to return the class. So drag in the class and return that guy like so. All right, and then back in the game state, we can now say get item class, hook that up, and so we already have that. So we will go out to do here the selecting edit state. So you got to make sure your game state is actually being used. So if you go to your edit project settings and your maps and modes, you need to make sure that under the selected game mode, you have your game state. So game state set to whichever one you've added that function to. Again, if you've added that function to an already existing game state, then just make sure you're using
Yeah, like I
that
really
game state.
don't think it's
So
supposed to
make
go
sure you
in
set it
game
here.
state.
And I guess one thing to
I
note,
mean, I
if
could
you're
be
kind of new
wrong.
to Unreal, well, first of all, congratulations on getting this far. But in the world settings, if you go to game mode override, you want to make sure this is either set to none or it's set to something and it's using your game state. Because if this is set to something, it's going to override whatever game state you've set in your project settings to use this one, whichever one you have specified here. So, and then we'll cast, we'll say on this, put thing towards the in your game. So we nicely, and then we can drop it, and things work pretty nicely. Oh, so well, not quite nicely yet. So we didn't actually write the function.
So for like actually physics-based dropping it, I think what we can do is basically create a camera-facing plane attached to the character, do a line trace on it, and anything else. And wherever the line trace result is, we can drop the item there. So like if we intersect the camera facing plane first, we would drop it in the air. If we intercept like an object, we would drop it at the object or something like that. But I'm not worried about the drop logic yet. We're more worried
To
about like the moving things around inside
remove
the
items, which is
inventory
why
object.
they're not being added back correctly or in the correct spot. So we need to write that function that actually removes items from the inventory. It's actually really simple. So if we go back to our inventory component and we go to remove items, remember we left this guy totally blank, which is why it's not quite working. So let's just fill this out real quick. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the item we're removing is valid. So we'll say is valid. And if it is valid, then we want to loop over all of our items. So we'll say for each loop. And then for each item, we basically want to check if that item equals the item we're dropping. And if it does, then we want to set it to nothing basically, or like invalidate it. So we'll say equals, and we want to check if it equals the get item object.
I think we know how to finish this part. Okay. Something like that.
And if it does, we'll do a branch. Then we want to say items set array element. And so we want to set the array element at this index. So we'll drag in the index, clean it up a little bit. So we want to set the item at that index to nothing. So we really just want to leave this empty. And then we also want to set is dirty to true, since we
Makes sense.
are removing something. And then we should be good to go. So now if we run this and we pick up some items and we drop and we drop and we drop and we pick it up again, just making sure this is all working as I would expect it to. Drop this guy, drop this guy, drop this guy, pick them all up. Yeah, it seems to be working pretty well, I think. Let me drop this guy, pick up this guy. Yeah, okay. So it seems to be working correctly now. Things are getting added where we would expect them to. Obviously, we don't have the rotation working yet, so you can't rotate items to make them fit better, but we will do that here shortly. Okay, so now we have dropping working. So the next thing we need to do is handling, like, moving items inside the inventory. So if we go to the inventory grid widget, we also want to override that on drop. So if we come up here and we say override on drop,
Okay.
and then it pops it up down here. So basically inside of here, we kind of want to do similar stuff with getting the payload and all that good stuff. And then, but instead of dropping it on the ground, we just want to move where it is inside of the inside of the grid. So this one's going to be a little bit more complicated, but shouldn't be too difficult. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a function for getting the payload. It'd be a very simple function, but it's just going to make our lives easier because we're going to be doing this a bunch. So let's make a function and call it get payload. And I'm going to move it into the drag and drop category just because it's pretty much related to that. And we can make it private as well. And we can make it constant as well. And so inside of here, we want it to take in a drag drop operation. So drag drop operation. We'll call it drag drop operation. And then the first thing it wants to do is we want to check if this is valid. And if it's not valid, we want to go ahead and just return nothing, basically. So for the output, we're actually going to be returning the payload. So the payload is going to be the BP underscore item object. And we will call this I guess we can just call it payload. And so if it's not valid, we want to just return an empty payload. But if it is valid, then we want to take this guy and we want to do a get payload and make sure you get the variable. So get payload, and then we'll say cast to BP item object, and we'll do a pure cast since we know it's going to succeed, and we want to return that. So we're going to copy and paste, hook that up, and hook that up. So again, this is just a little helper function for getting the payload casted as an item object out of our drag and drop operation. So if we come back to on drop, the first thing we want to do
Fine.
here is we want to create a sequence node. And the reason we're doing this is kind of like before. If it gets all the way through, then we want it to return true. Otherwise, we want it to return false. So since that's the case, we're going to put a return true down here on the then one. And then we will continue through this. So we will say get payload off of the drag and drop operation, like so. And then we can actually just delete this guy. And so we get the payload. And the first thing we want to check is if there is room available, like at the location where we're trying to drop this item. Because if there is not room available, then, well, if there is room available, then obviously we just want to drop it there. But if there's not room available, then we want to try to add it to the inventory just anywhere else that it will fit. So we can drag off of the payload and we'll use our is.
I see. Okay.
Is wait a minute. Is room, or is this a function I wrote? Oh, I guess I did. So we need to make another function. I forgot. So let's go ahead and add another function, drag it into the drag and drop category as well. And this one will be called is room available for payload. And this one's just mostly going to be calling the other is room available function, so it's not going to be too bad or anything like that. We can make this private and constant as well. And so inside of here, what we want to do is again start out with a sequence. And we need to take in, actually, yeah, we need to take in the payload, which I believe is just an item object. Let me double check on my other one. Yeah. So an item object.
He's going to need a
And we
mouse
will
data
call it
too.
the payload. And it's going to output whether or not room is available. So it's going to return a Boolean. And we will just call this the result, like so. And
I'm down with that.
so by default, we want to return false, unless it makes it all the way to the end, in which case we're going to return true. So we'll add false down here. And then we will say is valid to make sure it's actually valid, because obviously
You're going to need the
we don't want to do
geometry
anything if it's
figure
not valid.
top.
And so if it is valid, we want to check if there is room available in the inventory component. So if we drag in our inventory component, we can say is room available, which is that massive function we wrote earlier. And then we just need to specify the item object and the top left corner. So the item object is obviously
Okay, we'll do it like that. We need to get the top left index.
going to be our payload. So we'll just say get payload. Oops, not that one. Get payload, the input parameter, this guy over here. And then the top left corner is going to be, oh, we haven't written that yet. We will, well, okay, so over here on the left, we need to add a variable, which we will fill out in a second. But we basically need to have a variable that represents where the cursor is. So if we say variable, we're going to call this dragged item top left tile. So this is going to be the top left tile of where the item is currently being dragged or dropped over. And we want to change the type of this to be a int point. So we'll say int point, which again is just an x and a y. And we want to make sure it's not an array. And then we can add this to a drag and drop category and make it private. So we'll say private, and then we'll add it to a drag and drop category just because it's kind of related to that. And then I guess since while we're here, we're going to add another variable which we'll make use later. Just go ahead and duplicate this guy and then call it draw drop location and make this a bool. So we're going to use this bool for whether or not we should be drawing the drop location, which is that green or red like highlight behind the item. But yeah, we'll
Alright, dragged item, top left tile.
we'll come back and use this later. But the main thing we need right now is this guy. So the is room available needs the top left index. So we're going to be using this guy. So if we drag this in, we can say drag in our inventory component. component as well. So we need to convert this tile into an index. So we'll say tile to index, x and the y to the y. And again, we'll fill out, or we'll be setting this variable in a different spot. But for now, just assume that it is the top left corner of where our mouse is. So basically where we're trying to drop at. And so we're checking if room is available, and then we just want to go ahead and return that. So we'll just copy this guy, and we will return.
Okay.
Whenever that returns. So now we have a function that will check if the room is available for our payload to be dropped. So if we come back to our on dropped,
Okay.
we can call is room available for payload. And then we can do a branch, because again, we need to do different things depending on if the room is available or not. So if room is available, then we can simply just add the item to the inventory at the specified index, which is pretty easy. So we'll just say we want to get this operation. So we'll just right click and say get operation, and we will get the payload from it, get payload, which again is just our item object.
Why would
Hook this up to the true. And then we will say inventory component add item at, or add item. Oh, maybe I made that function private on accident.
like I don't understand why you would go through the trouble of doing this casting and validation and then just use the default ass payload item. You're gonna have to recast it. He's probably gonna realize in a second. Something like that. Okay.
Let me go double check. Go back to the inventory component. And where is add item? Oh, that's not the inventory component. Inventory component, add item at. Yeah, this should not be private. So this should be public since we need to actually call it, and then we'll make it public over here as well. So that way we can actually call it. And then we will come back to where.
For what it's worth, this is why I don't usually set things private until after everything's working. So, I don't know. This is just me, but like my dev process at work and when I'm working on side projects generally goes something like this. Your first pass, you just want everything to work. Everything is public. I don't worry about like classifying everything into neat little groups and whatever. I just throw everything together and get it working as fast as possible. The next thing I do usually is a cleanup pass. So this functions as a self code review and a chance to make everything like nice and neat and pretty. Um, the cleanup pass is an exhaustive crawl over everything you changed. So you go line by line or class by class or graph by graph and you look at every single node you changed. And this is the process where usually I'm trying to reclassify things in private or public, trying to put things in neat groups, add descriptions to things, add comments, things like that. And then, depending on how complex the system is, after you finish your first cleanup pass, you may want to do another cleanup pass. But basically, get it working first. Don't worry about making everything private or public because you don't know which functions you're going to need, which you're not until you're done, usually. And then go through everything and clean it up.
Where we were before, which is inventory grid. Or where were we? Inventory
grid
on drop. Yes, inventory grid on drop. Let me go back to it on my other monitor as well. Sorry,
I just want to know
there
how
for a
he's
second. Okay, so
calculating
now we can
the
call
grid.
add item at. And so again, this, if you remember from before, this function is just assuming that you already checked that there's room available, which we have. So I just want to make sure people understand that. You don't want to just call this willy-nilly. So the item we want to add is our payload. And then the location is going to be the dragged tile top left corner, except we need to convert it to an index. So again, we'll take the inventory component and we'll say tile to index.
Why?
And we'll split
It doesn't matter.
split this guy, and hook that up like so. Pretty
But like, why are you
straightforward.
splitting that if
Just
you
move
don't
this
have to
around so it's a little more organized.
change the
And
component
then move this up here. So that's basically what we want to do. And I think we can even run this now and we can see it working, at least partially. So if we pick this up,
you haven't implemented the
and we drag it down here and drop it.
No.
Oh wait, it's not going to work yet because we haven't set the drag tile top lift yet. We need to set that first. Let me figure out where I set that again. Find references. 1 second. Let me look at my other project.
In drag drop.
Oh right. Okay, actually let's just finish writing this and then we'll set that variable and then it should work. Yeah, so let's handle the case.
Find the nearest tile.
Or actually let's just do the other one first because I think it'd be better if I can show you it working. So there's another function we need to override here because we need to be able to set this variable. So if we override on drag over, I think it's called. Yeah, on drag over. So this is getting called whenever the mouse is currently being dragged over like
I
the
was gonna
widget.
say you
So
only need
whenever
this in drag drop, but that's not actually true because he's gonna draw like a highlight on the grid, and for that we will need it on drag over. So drag over. Okay.
it's being dragged over top of the grid. And when it's being dragged over top of the grid, we want to set that variable, this dragged item top left tile, because we want to be able to calculate that. And we also want to determine whether or not we should draw that background green or red color. So inside of here, we're going to start out with a sequence again. Again, I just like to do this whenever I am always wanting to return like true. So we're going to return true. And
Fine with that.
and then from there, the first thing we're going to do is
Probably gonna need something like that.
calculate the dragged items top left tile. So let's drag this guy in, and this is actually going to be a rather lengthy calculation, but so just move this over here. So what we want to do is we want to get the geometry and we want to get the mouse position from it. So we will say get my geometry, and we will say absolute to local. And then we want to get the pointer event, which is information about the mouse. So we'll say get pointer event. And we want to get screen space
And then you're probably gonna have to add this. Let's see if I'm right.
position. So that's the screen space position of the mouse, and we are converting it to local space for our widget. And so this is going to be our mouse position. So I'm just going to make this a local variable, promote to local variable, and we will call this the mouse position, and we'll make it local like so. And then we can hook this up. So that's the first thing we need to do. So now we know where the mouse is, but we need to know where the top left tile is. So we're going to make a little function called mouse position in tile. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell us if the mouse is in the top, the bottom, the left, or the right side of the tile. Because let me just run my other project real quick, because it's actually kind of complicated to explain. So you can see this green border that's showing up behind it. It's not perfectly behind the border of the thing we're dragging. It only shows up inside of the tile. So if you look at where the mouse actually is, so right now it's inside of, I have to try to put it in the center of this tile. So if you look at the tile that's around the mouse, you can see it's pretty much in the center of the tile. If I start going to the left side of the tile, you can see the green border shifts left because it sees, okay, you're more to the left, so we're going to shift to the left. And if you go to the right, you can see the green border will shift to the right. And same with up. So if I go up, I'm already on the upper half. Let me look at this one. So if I go up or down, you can see it shifts depending on where the mouse is. So it's basically trying to find the best location for the drop is what's happening. So we want to make a function that tells us if it's like on the right side, the left side, the top side, or the bottom side. So we'll make a function, and let's see here. Make a function, and we will call it mouse position in tile. And then let's add
Mouse tile quadrant. I suspect that I'm going to want to do this slightly different than him.
this to the private category. So drag it up to the private category and make it private. And so this is going to take in a vector 2D for the position of the mouse. So
And this can just return an endpoint, I think. And we'll use 0, 0 for top left, 1, 0 for top right, 0, 1 for bottom left, 1, 1 for bottom right. That's how I'm going to do it.
input parameter vector 2D. We will call this the mouse position, and then it's going to return 2 booleans. So it's going to return 1 for if it's on the right side. So if it's true, that means it's on the right side. If it's false, that means it's on the left side. And then another boolean for if it's on the bottom. So we'll just call it down. And so what we want to do here is just a little bit of math to figure out which side it's on. So we're going to take the x and we'll say fmod. So if you search for fmod, or maybe what is it called? If you do the percent sign, it'll show up. Yeah, so it's this thing, whatever this is called. Modulo. So we want to select this guy, and we want to modulate by the tile size. And then we want to check if this is greater than, float, greater than the tile size divided by 2. So we'll say set.
All right, I take it back. Okay.
Tile size, float divided by 2. If it is, then that means it's on the right side, so we'll hook that up to that boolean. And we basically want to do the same thing for the mouse position Y. So we will take this. Actually, I'm just going to copy all of this and paste. And then we will copy this into here. And then I don't think we need to actually change anything. We just need
That's
to hook
not
this
right.
up into the down output pin. Let me just double check that that is correct.
That can't be
Yes,
right.
I think it is. Okay.
Oh,
So for this guy, yeah, we can make it private, and we can also make it
okay.
const as well. And then we can come back here to our on drop. Or no, where were we? We were inside of on drag over, right? So inside of on drag over, we want to then use this function. So we'll say, where is it? Mouse position to tile. And we will pass in our mouse position. And then we will also make local variables for these because we'll be using them later.
Oops.
Later. So we'll say right click, promote to local variable, and we will call this right local, and right click again, promote to local variable, and we will call this down local, like so. And then now that we have where the position of the mouse is inside of the tile, we can use that to calculate this
Offset.
dragged item top left. So to do that, let's get our operation. So we want to get this guy. So we will say get operation, and we're going to do this kind of down here because it's going to be a little long. And we want to actually we can just call
You're good to go. It's hard to name a thing in this lifetime that'll last me a lifetime, but I'll only need one internet.
or no, we'll just do this. So we'll say get payload, and then we want to cast this to our item object. So cast to item object.
I go to the effort of making
we'll make
a
this a pure
function
cast.
for this.
And so from here, we want to get the dimensions of the object. So get dimensions. And we're going to split this guy.
Like, I don't understand why you would go to the effort of making a safe getter and then not use it. Like, just don't make it then. Alright, so sure. We're probably going to need a scale, I bet.
And we are going to do a int subtract, so integer minus integer. And we want to subtract 1 if we are on the right side. Otherwise, we don't want to do anything. So we will say drag in right, and we will say select, and we will hook up the input into there. And then if it's true, we will pass in 1. And if it's false, we just want to leave that at 0. So something
Okay.
like this. And we want to clamp this value. So we'll say clamp integer between 0 and whatever the max is, because basically we just want to make sure it doesn't go below 0. And then we're going to copy this and paste and do the same thing for the y, except we want to replace the right local with down. So we
Okay.
just drag this on top. So we have down local and hook that up. And then we want to take this value and take these values and make a point from it. So we'll say make int point.
Okay.
Make int point, like so. And then we want to divide this by 2 so we can get the center. So we'll say integer divided by, or int point divided by integer, and we will pass in 2. And we want to take
What? Fine. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. They don't let us do that. Whatever. This is the same thing.
this value and we want to subtract it from the mouse's position, basically. So we will say get mouse position local, and we will say divided by the tile size, which is over here. And
Mouse position local. Divided by tile size.
And then we want to subtract. So we actually want to use a int point subtraction. So if we search for int point subtract, we want this one. So int point minus int point. And then we want to split this top pin, and we want to split this and then hook these up, and it's going to do a truncate, and that's okay because we want it to truncate. And then this is going to be the subtract, and then this is going to be our dragged top. Top left. So I know that was a lot to follow, but it's basically just some math to figure out where the top left point is. Nothing crazy. All right. So I believe that's all we need to do for that function. Just, oh, do we not? Yeah, okay. So now that we have this, we can try to run this again. So if we run this and we go and we pick up our guns and we start dragging and we drop it, you can see it now will drop.
Let's try it. Nope, did not work.
It as we'll be using them later. So we'll say right click, promote to local variable, and we will call this right local, and right click again, promote to local variable. Actually, let me look at something real quick on my other project. Where am I?
Let's Screen space absolute to local with my geometry. Geometry. Screen space position. Absolute to local. Set mouse position. Mouse position in tile. Operation target payload. Dimensions XY.
My setting. So inside of here, we want to get this operation again. So we'll say get operation. And what we're doing right now is we are writing the code for if there is no room available.
Hang on. Is room available for payload in on drop? This is why. What? Kind of working, but not really.
Get this operation again. So we'll say get. So actually, let me look already there. If it's a bad, we would like to be able to see like where it's dropping it at, and we also want to see if it's a bad drop or not. And currently, also right now, if we try to drop it on top of something that's already there, it just gets deleted basically. Let me pick up our gun. Yeah, okay. So now that we have
Mouse point local divided by tile size. Truncate. What? Interesting. Oh, you know what? I know it's dropping. Okay, something with my display is off. Because I bet that if I move, like it's actually moving internally, because we can see. So, oops, that didn't work. Item at index 26. So we should be able to move this over here. Index 7. Hmm. Yeah. Still some bugs to work out. So this is on drag over. Okay, that's what he's in. Position a tile, get dimensions, minus a select, 0 and 1. Uh, 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 I do kind of wish you would like pause and once over the entire thing at the final working state because it is a little difficult. Absolute. Okay, hang on. I need more resolution. Can I get higher quality, please? My geometry, absolute local screen space coordinates of the pointer event set to the local mouse position. Mouse position and tile, we'll look at that in a second. Payload, get dimensions, minus, branched on right, 0, 1, 0, 1, branched on down, clamped. So that's right quadrant. This is bottom quadrant. That looks right. Minus, minus. Yep, that looks correct. Clamp. Yep, 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 yep. Looks right. Okay, all of that looks right. And then divide by 2. Okay, that should be fine. Mouse position divided by tile size, truncated. Okay. Right bottom. Turn value is checked over here.
Just, oh, do we not? Yeah, okay. So now that we have this, we can try to run this again.
Okay, okay, yeah. He's always, so he's just always returning true. We don't need this. Clean it up a little bit. Like I said earlier, I'm definitely gonna do, I always do, I kind of try to bang things together and get them working and don't worry too much about making it readable because I always like to do like kind of my own code review on all my stuff where I go line by line, graph by graph, step through every single thing change that was made and do like a code cleanup pass at the end. So we're gonna do that. Uh-huh. As far as I can tell, this is correct. But something is wrong. Something is wrong somewhere. This should be setting. Did my remove complete? Removed. It was actually in. Remove was in the component. Seems fine. So yeah, it's definitely not working exactly right. Mm-hmm.
So if we run this and we go and we pick up our guns and we start dragging and we drop it, you can see it now. We'll drop it.
We've missed something. Mouse position and tile. Let's go check this again. Okay, that's what we have.
Make it private, and we can also make it constant.
Um, I think we may have missed something in our draw method or something. Let's add some logging. We need the grid. Okay, that's part of it, I think. Disconnected. Return for the event. Means you were getting fielded by the one under it, maybe? It's still fucked, though. Now wait a second. Clear children. Get all the items for each of the items. Create a widget for the item if yep, and then find that point. Add child. Right here. Add child top left. Actually, append. Add child top position. D. Okay. Let's try it again. Aha. Yes. Pistol. Test inventory items. Spawn. This will go away when we're done, but for now we need the test items. And then let's see. I'm quite confused by what's going on here. do have some logging here we can already use. Add an item at IDX 14, but then it just does 2222. Okay, so one thing we can do here is this. I think this is going to stop our drops from propagating. So we should stop seeing the dropped messages as long as we drop it over this. Yep. Seven, 6, 7, 5. This should be 0, 0. Okay, that stops one of our problems, which is that our event was propagating. This should be like 1. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure why we're getting add child invoked twice. So let's figure that out. That seems fine. can't I delete this Boolean conversion? I don't understand. Right. Guess we'll deal with that later. Pistol. What? Okay, let's go ahead and close anything we have. That's not related. We can close this. We can close this. We can close this, and we can close this. And I think we can close this as well. Okay. Let's go in our grid drop method, add some logging. Uh, Phoenix. 4, 10, 5, 11 makes sense. Where's this other print stream coming from? All right. Iterating. Top left. IDX. Grid. IDX. Damn it. Let's get some more info here. Zero, zero, zero. 0004. Spawn rifle, spawn pistol, and then it spawned rifle and a pistol again. I don't know why it's double initializing, but it shouldn't affect the actual interface itself. Alright, so now edit item at 17, iterating 17, left grid is 5 2, iterated 5 2, 5 2, 5 Tree. Inventory grid. Add child top left position. Okay. Inventory grid. There's no way this is it, but it might actually be it. Hmm. This is. Hmm. It's as if this is failing. Lookup failed. Any lookup fails. Where are we calling add on drop? Am I passing the index? With index. Wait. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Then add item with index 29, added item and IDX 29, iterating top left. 29 iterates, populates all the items. Added item to return table with grid index. Ah. So it's populating the array at the right places, but it's adding the item to the return table with the wrong grid and array indices. So here it added item at index 29, iterated over the right block of grid indices, but then my added item to return table, that is let's look at our populate IDX output. Okay, so it's populating the correct array indices. However, Okay, those should be correct. And then, yeah, what the fuck, man? Goodbye. All right, this is actually a good stopping point here. I'm going to go walk my dog and get some lunch, and I'll be back a little bit later. So, later.